Your heart is this incredible, tireless pump, right? It beats something like 100,000 times every single day. But what happens when the problem isn't with the pipes, the arteries, or the electrical wiring, but with the actual muscle of the pump itself? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into today. We're talking about cardiomyopathy.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to nail down what cardiomyopathy actually is. Then, we'll dive into the three main ways the heart muscle can fail by getting all stretched out, way too thick, or super stiff. And to wrap it all up, we'll pull everything together and see how these three conditions stack up against each other.
So, first things first, what exactly is cardiomyopathy? Let's build a really solid foundation here so we all know what we're talking about. Okay, so the single most important thing to get is that this is a disease of the heart muscle, the myocardium. This isn't a secondary issue. The problem starts and ends with the engine of the heart itself, which messes up its ability to pump blood, both mechanically and sometimes even electrically. And just as important is understanding what it's not. This is a common point of confusion. Cardiomyopathy isn't something you get because your arteries are clogged or because you have high blood pressure. Those are different problems. This is a fundamental, primary failure happening inside the muscle tissue itself. All right, let's jump into our first type. I want you to picture the heart's main pumping chamber becoming like a big, stretched-out, floppy water balloon. It's just too weak to give a good squeeze. That, in a nutshell, is dilated cardiomyopathy. The keywords here are dilation, meaning it gets bigger, and impaired contraction. The ventricles, the powerhouses of the heart, they just lose their oomph. They can't squeeze effectively. And that failure of the squeeze, of the contraction phase, has a name: systolic dysfunction. So you're probably wondering, what causes this? Well, it can be a whole bunch of things. A virus can do it, toxins like too much alcohol, certain chemo drugs, or even a genetic hiccup. But, and this is pretty wild, most of the time, the cause is what doctors call idiopathic, which is really just a fancy way of saying, we honestly don't know. And once it starts, it can kick off this really dangerous downward spiral. It begins with some kind of injury to the muscle cells. That causes the heart wall to get thin and stretch out. Naturally, that weaker wall can't squeeze as hard, so less blood gets pumped with each beat. The body senses this, panics, and tries to compensate by holding on to more fluid, which only overloads the already struggling heart. It's a vicious cycle. So what's the end result of this weak, baggy pump? Well, you get classic systolic heart failure. Plus, that stretched-out shape can mess with the heart's electrical wiring, leading to rhythm problems or arrhythmias. And it can even pull the heart valves apart so they start to leak. Now, let's do a complete 180. Forget about a heart that's too big and floppy. Our next case is a heart that's gotten way too muscular, too thick, muscle-bound to work properly. With this one, the problem isn't the squeeze at all. The heart is plenty strong. The problem is the fill. The muscle grows so thick that there's just not enough room inside the chamber for blood to get in. This is a failure of the relaxation phase of diastole. And what's really fascinating here is the cause. This isn't something you get from your lifestyle. It's almost always genetic. There's a fundamental error in the blueprints for the very proteins that make the heart muscle contract. It's baked into your DNA. So here's how the story goes. The individual muscle cells themselves start bulking up, and they get all jumbled and disorganized. This makes the heart wall incredibly thick and stiff, so it just can't relax and open up to fill with blood. And in some people, that overgrown muscle actually starts to act like a plug, physically blocking blood from getting out of the heart. The consequences are pretty different here. You get what's called diastolic heart failure, all because of that poor filling. And tragically, this is the condition you often hear about when a young, seemingly healthy athlete suddenly collapses. That intense physical activity can trigger a lethal arrhythmia in a heart like this. Okay, on to our third and final scenario. For this one, the muscle isn't necessarily weak, and it's not overly thick. Instead, it's become rigid and stiff, almost as if it's trapped in a cage and can't move freely. Now, just like the hypertrophic type, this is another diastolic problem, a failure to fill properly. But here's the key difference. The systolic function, the squeeze, is often totally fine. The muscle has the strength to contract, it just can't relax and expand the way it's supposed to. So what's making it so rigid? Well, it's not muscle growth this time. Instead, it's caused by other things infiltrating the heart wall and basically turning it to stone. We're talking about things like abnormal proteins in a disease called amyloidosis, or maybe scar tissue from past radiation treatments. So here's the chain of events. Some kind of unwanted material, like protein or scar tissue, gets deposited in and around the heart muscle cells. This turns the normally flexible heart walls into these rigid, unyielding boxes. Since they can't stretch to accept blood, the blood can't get in, and you get a massive traffic jam as pressure builds up backward through the whole circulatory system.
The result of that traffic jam is profound congestion throughout the body. All that backed up pressure forces fluid to leak out into the tissues. This is what causes things like swollen legs, a fluid-filled abdomen, and even those prominent bulging neck veins you might see. It's all because the heart physically cannot accept the blood that's trying to return to it.
Phew. Okay, so we've just walked through 3 very, very different ways the heart muscle can fail. Now, let's do the fun part. Let's put them all side by side to really highlight the differences and see the bigger picture. And here it is, the whole story in one neat little table. You can see it so clearly now, right? Dilated is a systolic problem, a weak squeeze from a thin, stretched out heart. But then you have hypertrophic and restrictive. They're both diastolic problems, poor filling, but for completely opposite reasons. One's caused by a muscle that's too thick, the other by a wall that's too stiff and infiltrated. So if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this: structure dictates function. It's that simple. Whether the heart muscle is too thin, too thick, or too stiff directly determines how it's going to fail as a pump. This isn't just one disease, it's a whole family of conditions, all rooted in the muscle itself. And that really leaves us with something to chew on, doesn't it? It makes you appreciate just what an amazing piece of engineering a healthy heart is. It's this perfect, delicate balance between strength and flexibility. And when that balance is lost, you have to wonder, what's really more critical to keeping us going? The raw power of the squeeze or the subtle grace of the fill?